All right, welcome to another deep dive, everybody. We're all about taking a specific topic and basically extracting all the really important stuff.
Yeah, taking these dense sources
Yeah,
and just giving you the core, so you can get up to speed really quickly. Think of it as your shortcut to being in the know.
exactly. And today, that shortcut takes us right into the world of professional speaking. We are going to be diving deep into Grant Baldwin's book, The Successful Speaker, to understand what it really takes
To make this a full-time gig?
to build a career, to make a good living. We often have many different sources we're looking at, but for this particular deep dive, it's all about Grant Baldwin's book.
Yeah, one source, one book, gets you everything you need to know.
We know you're busy and you want to learn efficiently. So our goal today is to really unpack the core principles, the aha moments that Grant Baldwin has learned through his experience.
So whether you envision yourself on a big stage, maybe a TED Talk someday.
Yeah, or maybe you just want to get paid. I mean, think about it. Getting paid to share your knowledge a few times a year,
That would be pretty sweet.
that would be pretty sweet. This episode is for you.
So let's jump right in talking about Baldwin. What got him interested in speaking professionally?
Yeah, it's a pretty relatable spark, actually. He credits his youth pastor as his kind of initial inspiration.
Someone who could really connect.
Yeah, someone who could really connect with people, with young people, through his talks and the way he delivered them.
Yeah, someone who is charismatic.
Very charismatic. And so that planted a seed, I think, in Baldwin. Like the idea of speaking as a way to impact.
And then, surprisingly early on, he just started reaching out to people who might need speakers.
He did. And to his amazement, he landed a big.
Yeah. That first booking was for a 4-H conference, right?
Right.
What was that experience like?
4-H conference. So on leadership, and I believe it was, a couple hundred students.
Pretty decent-sized group.
Yeah. And, I think like many people starting out, he had this kind of innocent excitement, like checking into a hotel.
Maybe there's a little gift basket.
Maybe there's a welcome basket. And, this is the life.
Yeah, this is it.
Little did he know what the actual speaking part would involve.
So how did the actual speech part go? Couldn't have all been welcome baskets.
Not exactly. He talks about the nerves, of stepping onto the stage and in front of 400 young people.
Oh, man.
And he had practiced his talk a lot, but this was the real thing. He gave his talk and then silence.
Oh, boy.
Just this moment of quiet.
Oh.
That made him wonder, did I completely bomb?
That'd be rough.
And all these doubts rush in, did I go too fast? Was the content off?
I'm sure we've all been there. A little bit of that imposter syndrome coming out.
Totally, yeah. So then one person starts clapping. Just one. And then another. And it grows into a full standing ovation
Wow.
from everybody,
Yeah.
students and adults. And he was completely taken aback.
Especially for the first one.
Right, especially for your very first.
That's pretty encouraging.
Very encouraging, yeah. And so he's, leaving. And the event organizer hands him an envelope.
Yeah. Here's your gift basket.
It's the gift basket. No, it's a check for $1,000.
Now, $1,000 for 45 minutes? That's not bad.
That's not bad at all, especially starting out.
That's a big moment. What was his reaction?
He was stunned. He even jokes, maybe a little drool came out. But for him, it wasn't just the money, it was the timing. His family was going through a tough financial period, and that $1,000 was exactly what they needed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Practically and emotionally. And he talks about sitting in his car afterward and just having this intense emotional release. And not just a little sniffle, but full-on tears.
Oh, man. Realizing this is it.
This is it. This is what I want to do.
This is my calling.
I know I just made a difference and they paid me to do it. And so this kind of unexpected reward, I think, really solidified his calling.
Yeah. And then you see how successful he's become. It says in the book, over 1,000 presentations, over $2 million in fees.
Yeah. And he's spoken to over 500,000 people in the last 10 years.
Crazy. Yeah. And it's a testament, I think, to, the book's core message.
Yeah.
Anyone listening who maybe feels a little pull towards speaking, Baldwin is basically saying, you can become a professional speaker.
Yeah, not just a dreamer.
No,
not a hobbyist.
Not an amateur. You can make this your living.
A real professional.
And he emphasizes it's not just about luck, right? You don't just have to be a naturally gifted speaker.
Right.
He's saying it's about having a structured approach.
A system.
A process.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main takeaway here. Professional speaking is a skill set, a business you can learn.
That's right. And, through his own experience and then working with so many other successful speakers.
All the greats.
Yeah, he has seen that there's this very specific system at work. Some people figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
Others learn it intentionally.
Right.
But it's definitely not just chance. And so the book is really about breaking down that process, the same framework that he's taught thousands of people.
So let's talk about that, right?
Yeah.
What does Baldwin even mean by professional speaker?
Yeah. He really boils it down to this. You are starting a speaking business. And he makes the point that so many aspiring speakers never think in those terms.
Right. It's a hobby.
And that's a major reason why they never
Just take it to the next level.
to achieve the level of success they want to achieve.
Yeah. They don't think of it as a business. They think of it as...
Yeah, they might enjoy it. They might be good at it, even.
as a hobby.
But they don't treat it like a business.
Right.
You know, a venture that needs structure, that needs a plan.
And this book, it provides that structure.
Right.
That process for getting booked and getting paid.
That's exactly what the book aims to do.
Regardless of how big your goals are, right? Like,
Doesn't matter how big or small.
if you want to do it just a few times a year, or if you want to go full time, it can work.
He says that these steps, these principles, they apply.
And he introduces this idea, the speaker success roadmap.
Yeah.
This is like the system
It's the
to go from amateur to professional.
Yes.
And to kind of, to really illustrate that this isn't just theoretical, that this works. He talks about Eric.
Yeah.
And Eric went from, $5,000 a year
Taking, yeah.
to over $1 million.
Annually.
So this thing works.
Roadmap works. Eric was, he was speaking, but he was only making about $5,000 a year, which he loved doing it.
Yeah.
But, it wasn't enough to
Pay the bills.
make a living. And so he felt kind of stuck. And then he connected with Baldwin and really started putting these steps into place.
And that's when things took off.
And things took off.
So let's dive into it. What's step one?
Step one is all about selecting a problem to solve.
Okay.
And Baldwin frames this using three Rhett's words: industry, interest, and integrity.
All right. Industry, interest, integrity.
And he says the order here is really important. You need to start by understanding your audience.
That's industry.
That's industry, because ultimately your ideal speaking niche is where those three things connect. What does the audience need? What are you genuinely excited about? And where do you have experience? Where do you have expertise?
Okay, so understanding the audience first, that makes sense. How can you tailor your message?
Right.
How can you offer solutions if you don't even know who you're talking to and what problems they have?
Totally.
He gives an example of Melanie DeZiel.
He does, yeah. Melanie, a journalism expert. She was working for a tea brand studio at the New York Times.
Okay.
And she kind of stumbled into speaking when there was an opportunity to present research at a tourism conference.
Just kind of fell into her lap.
Yeah, it wasn't something she was pursuing, but after that experience, she realized that if she wanted to do more speaking, she needed her own distinct message, something that she was genuinely passionate about sharing rather than just presenting someone else's data.
And that's where her journalism background came in. She merged that with the marketing world, right?
Yes, she was really interested in storytelling. And from a journalistic point of view.
Okay.
And she really recognized a need for better journalistic style storytelling in the marketing world. Marketers often are so focused on selling that storytelling can take a back seat. But Melanie saw that powerful storytelling is more effective selling.
Right. It's more authentic.
It's more authentic, yeah. And so this is a unique perspective, kind of bridging these two things.
Okay, so that's choosing your industry. You got to know your audience. You got to know what problems they're facing.
Yeah, what keeps them up at night.
Yeah.
When someone asks you, what do you speak about? What they're really asking is, how can you provide value to me?
Yeah, how can you make my life better?
Totally.
Yeah.
And so Baldwin emphasizes, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is trying to be too general.
Right. Speak to everyone about everything.
Yeah, you need to pick an industry or, a specific audience segment to focus on. And he offers some practical advice here. He says, you don't have to commit to this industry forever. Just choose the one that seems like the best fit right now.
Yeah.
He says, consider your current or past work experience.
Right.
And think about, existing connections you might have.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if you spent years in the corporate world, that's a natural starting point. You already have those connections.
And the book gives another great example here. Dr. Sue Ettinger, the veterinarian whisperer.
Yeah.
So what's her story? How does that illustrate this?
So she was a practicing veterinarian and received an invitation to speak at a major veterinary conference
Okay.
about her area of expertise, which was pet cancer,
Okay.
and specifically her proactive See Something, Do Something program.
Interesting.
And so she had this wealth of knowledge. She was very passionate about this. This was her professional community.
Yeah.
And after that initial engagement, she realized, like, oh, I've caught the bug.
She got bit.
She got bit.
Yeah.
And so because she had this well-defined industry
Right.
and established expertise,
It was a great launch point.
it was a great foundation for her. So then once you have a good sense of industry, the next I is interest.
Okay.
What are you excited to speak about?
And what's the main insight here?
The main point here is event planners want to know what you are excited about speaking on. They don't want you to turn the question back to them and ask what they want.
That's interesting.
He uses the example of a restaurant with no menu.
Oh.
You walk in, there's no menu, what are you going to get? How do you know what to order? How much does it cost?
Right. You feel a little uneasy.
Yeah, what is this place?
Right. It's a little mysterious.
And so he's saying that saying I can speak on anything is kind of like having a restaurant with no menu.
Yeah, it's kind of off-putting.
It's off-putting.
It makes you seem like you're not really an expert in anything.
And also, the other thing that he brings up here is that, think about a reality TV star.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, if a reality TV star says I can speak on anything, the event coordinator who's booking that person probably has a very specific interest.
Yeah, we want to hear about the reality show.
Yeah, we want to hear behind the scenes. What was that experience like? Like, what lessons did you learn?
Not just whatever's on your mind today.
Right. And so he says you need to narrow your focus.
Right. Pick an area.
Choose something specific that genuinely interests you.
Okay. So how do we identify that interest?
He has two key questions.
Okay.
What do you enjoy talking about? And he says to choose something that, you're passionate about.
Right.
But also make sure there's actually an industry or an audience who hires speakers on that subject.
That's crucial.
Yeah.
Otherwise, no one's going to pay you to talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other question is the 5-year test. Can I see myself speaking on this topic with enthusiasm 5 years from now?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, because if you can't, it might not be the right kind of long-term focus.
And we see this with Melanie Dizio, right? Her interest really stemmed from her actual day-to-day work.
Yeah. As a content strategist, she realized that she was really passionate about this idea of teaching brands how to think like journalists,
Okay.
to tell better stories. And so her personal interests kind of naturally align with this clear need that she had observed.
Right.
And Baldwin also recommends, looking at other speakers' websites
Oh, yeah.
in your chosen industry, see what's resonating.
That's a good point.
What topics do people seem to care about?
Look at the competition.
And he even suggests looking at speakers who are only 2 to 3 years ahead of you in their career.
Okay. So not the ones that are like, the Tony Robbinses of the world, but more like
Yeah, a little bit closer.
the up-and-comers.
Up-and-comers, yeah. And then, so that brings us to the final I in step 1, integrity.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Yeah. How do we define that as a speaker?
Integrity is about being authentic, about being honest about your actual experience
Okay.
and your knowledge.
So it's not about being perfect. It's not about being the foremost expert,
It's not about having a PhD.
but having relative expertise.
Right.
And like, you can do what you say you can do.
Right.
Give some examples here, right? Like his wife, Sheila, speaking about homeschooling.
Right. So she was able to speak at homeschooling conferences, not because she had a degree in education,
Right.
but because she had years of practical hands-on
You're
experience.
living it. Yeah.
And so she had these insights that other parents would find helpful.
Yeah.
And that lived experience really gave her integrity.
Right.
He also gives the example of recommending a budgeting tool
Oh.
that he personally used and found effective. And he wasn't a financial guru,
Right.
but because he shared something that genuinely worked for him,
Mhm.
people started coming to him for advice on this topic.
Right.
And so to them, he had become this trusted expert
Because he had used it.
just because he had used it. Yeah.
That makes sense.
And so, even as you start to get different opportunities, there can be a temptation
You had to go outside your wheelhouse a little bit.
to venture outside your area. And Baldwin even talks about, his very first paid gig at the 4-H leadership conference. He wasn't a farmer, but he spoke on what he did know, which was leadership.
Okay.
And he did that with integrity. staying within his experience.
Great.
And that led to even more opportunities. He got invited to other 4-H things, other FFA things, based on recommendations.
So you're building on those initial successes.
You're building on those initial successes. And so the takeaway here is people are willing to pay speakers who are genuine.
Right. People can spot a fake from a mile away.
Yeah, who are true to themselves and who share authentic knowledge.
Great. So we've selected a problem to solve. We've used industry, interest, and integrity.
That's step 1.
What's step 2?
Step 2 is about preparing and delivering your talk.
All right. And how do we do that?
So Baldwin is very clear on this point.
Yeah.
You have to prepare your core talk before you start thinking about building a website or reaching out to potential clients.
So don't get ahead of yourself.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
The best marketing
Is having a great talk.
is delivering a great talk.
Yeah.
And this section talks about Dustin,
Okay.
who joined Toastmasters to improve his presentation skills.
Classic move. Yeah.
But as he went through this process, he actually discovered this much deeper fulfillment in speaking than he had as a DJ.
Interesting. So he was doing something else and realized, like, speaking.
Speaking was the thing.
This is much better.
Yeah, at first he pursued keynote presentations,
Okay.
but he soon realized that a more intimate format, like workshops,
Okay.
was a much better fit for him, for his personality.
More interaction.
More interaction, yeah. He wanted to go deeper with people. And so this realization led him to launch Rockstar Academy, which is this personal development seminar. After collecting email addresses at these free speaking gigs.
Nice little strategy.
Yeah, and this shift to the seminar-based model, offering kind of more intensive training, was incredibly successful. And so his story really underscores the point that keynotes aren't the only path, and choosing the type of talk that really suits your strengths and the impact you want to make
Is essential.
Yeah,
So he then goes on to talk about the 3 types: keynotes, workshops, and seminar.
that's right.
So let's start with keynote. Like, what makes a keynote a keynote?
So keynotes, they typically command the biggest part of an event's speaking budget.
Okay, so that's good for the speaker.
Good for the speaker.
Yeah.
And they generally involve this blend of entertainment and content.
Okay. So you got to be a little bit entertaining.
Yeah.
But you still got to have the goods.
Still got to have some substance.
And the book gives an example of Jay Acunzo.
Yeah, who realized that keynotes were right for him after enjoying giving a thank you speech.
Oh, wow.
Kind of revealed his strength.
So sometimes it's the unexpected things
Yeah,
that kind of reveal what you're good at.
totally. And Baldwin shares, his general approach to keynotes, which is roughly 75% entertainment and 25% teaching.
Okay. So more on the entertainment side.
More on the entertainment side.
Yeah.
And he really emphasizes the need to keep a large audience engaged.
Right.
And so he talks about humor and stories. He even gives a very vivid example of telling a 7-minute story to illustrate a 2-minute point when he was speaking to high schoolers.
Wow.
So high level of engagement.
Okay, so that's keynote.
Yeah.
What about workshops? How's that different?
So workshops, shorter in duration. They're generally 45 to 90 minutes.
Okay, so you got less time.
Smaller audiences.
Okay.
More intimate, typically like 25 to a couple hundred people.
Okay.
And so a more relaxed vibe. And Baldwin actually reverses his ratio here. So 25% entertainment, 75% teaching.
Oh, wow.
Because
Okay.
people are there to learn.
So more content heavy.
Much more content heavy. They want practical, actionable information.
And he also points out a strategic benefit of offering workshops. They can be a really great way to build rapport with event planners, which can then lead to keynote opportunities.
Oh, that's
So they can kind of see you in action at a smaller scale.
right. And they can see how you interact.
Right. And it's also a good place to test out new content and refine your material that you might later use in a keynote.
Oh, that's a good point.
And he gives an example here of Robert, who focuses on workshops for his for content creation and storytelling,
Okay.
but then uses his keynotes for lead generation.
So they kind of work hand in hand.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got keynotes, workshops,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's seminars.
Seminars.
So how do we define a seminar?
Seminars can vary in length. You can have half-day intensives. You can have multi-day programs.
Yeah.
And they're really all about intensive learning, transformation.
Deep dives, lots of audience interaction. And Dave gives a good example of this. He uses his keynotes and conferences to generate leads specifically for his seminars.
Oh, nice. So he's doing a keynote,
Mm-hmm.
but then saying, hey, if you want to go deeper,
If you want to learn more, come to my seminar.
yeah, That's good strategy.
And he also mentioned seminar companies like SkillPath, National Seminars, Fred Pryor,
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
which can offer a good avenue for getting experience.
Okay.
But the pay might not be great.
Yeah.
And it's pretty demanding. He talks about doing 5 different cities in 5 days.
Grueling,
Yeah.
but good experience.
Yeah.
And so we've got these 3 different types. How does somebody decide, which one to focus on?
So he says, go to conferences in your industry,
Right.
see what the formats are like.
Attend, watch, learn.
He even suggests volunteering. Sometimes you can volunteer and get free admission.
That's a good point.
And, as you develop your career, you can offer all 3. Yeah.
But have a strategy for each one.
Okay.
So the key is to select one type to focus on and then research events in your industry that book speakers specifically for that.
Right.
And he actually points people to his website, speakerbookbonus.com,
Okay.
and has some examples of speakers menus there.
So we've picked the type of talk. Now, how do we actually create that talk?
It all starts with having a very clear objective. What do you want to accomplish?
Right. What's the goal?
Until you know what that goal is, any time you spend on your talk will feel like you're spinning your wheels.
Yeah.
And he also emphasizes the importance of distilling it down to a single, powerful idea.
So what's the one thing people are going to walk away with?
Right. And then he talks about structure.
Okay.
And he outlines 4 different frameworks for structuring a talk. These come from Michael Port's book, Steal the Show.
Okay.
So the first one is numerical.
Like 3 steps to this or 5?
You structure it around a certain number of key principles or points.
Okay.
Often odd numbers work best.
Okay. Chronological.
Okay.
You build your presentation step by step. He gives an example of his Life as a Highway presentation, which goes from past, present to future.
I like that.
And then modular,
Okay.
where you develop standalone sections that can be presented in different orders.
Okay.
Depending on the audience, you might shuffle things.
Mix and match. Yeah.
And then the final one is problem solution. You identify a very specific problem,
Okay.
and then you offer solutions to address that problem.
Makes sense.
And then, of course, there's the crucial element of stories.
Ah, yes, stories. Everyone loves a good story.
Everyone loves a good story, and Baldwin really highlights the power of storytelling
Okay.
and offers some very practical advice on how to capture and utilize stories.
All right, so why are stories so important?
So they make your message much more memorable for the audience,
Okay.
but they also serve as anchors for you as the
Right.
speaker
Oh, that's a good point.
to help you remember your key points. They act as bridges between different parts of your presentation.
Yeah.
And of course, they keep the audience engaged.
Yep.
Baldwin shares his habit of writing down story ideas immediately whenever they occur to him.
Okay.
He uses an example of something his daughter said at Disney World that was just this perfect little story idea.
Yeah.
And he really advises, be on the lookout. Develop a system for capturing these, whether that's using, some kind of software,
Yeah.
a note-taking app on your phone,
Right.
or a notebook, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
He also suggests taking an inventory of the stories you already have.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. What are some things that you could pull from?
Yeah.
Initially, he says to focus on what happened
Okay.
without necessarily trying to figure out what the point of the story is yet,
Okay.
just what happened. And Michael Port offers some brainstorming prompts here. Think about people, think about places, think about pivotal moments that have happened in your life.
Oh, I like that.
And then he says, write it out.
Okay.
So write the story, add in details that you might forget.
Yeah.
But then comes the editing.
Okay.
So ruthlessly cut any details that don't move the story forward
Right.
or that aren't essential for the audience to understand.
So get to the point.
Get to the point. Yeah, he gives a funny example about including boring details about a couple's engagement.
Right.
Like, who cares?
Yeah. No one needs to know all that.
Right, that's not relevant.
Yeah.
And then he also emphasizes that you need to pay attention to the transitions
Oh,
from
yeah.
the story back to your main point.
Okay.
What is the so what? And the now what?
Yeah. Making clear how it ties in.
Don't leave your audience hanging. Like, why did you just share that?
Yeah.
And then he talks about humor.
Ah, yes. The dreaded humor.
So humor can be tricky, but when it's done well,
It's so effective.
incredibly effective. It engages the audience. It builds